Hello and welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Vinu Sandhu. Let's take a look at the stories for the day.
इस बार मनाली चलते हैं।
नहीं गोवा।
We Indians disagree on everything, but we agree. SBI is the banker to every Indian.
SBI से ट्रैक्टर लोन लिया, पाजी ये 100% सही किया।
SBI is the banker to every Indian.
Tata Group's much-awaited super app will finally be launched tomorrow. Tata Neu is bringing all the company's digital services to one place, heating up competition in the segment. But even as the Tata Group consolidates its strategy, one clear trend is emerging. It is doubling down on its consumer-facing businesses. Our next report has more on that.
The launch of Tata Group's super app signals its continuing focus on the e-commerce segment as it attempts to take on Amazon and Jio platforms. At the same time, the Tatas are doubling down on their consumer-facing businesses, which is likely to complement their super app play. In particular, the group is looking at synergies. For example, Air India's acquisition is likely to help a host of group entities from TCS to the Tata Neu super app to cross-sell products to the captive airline customers. As of October 2021, the group was also exploring opportunities for cross-selling Indian Hotels and Tata Capital offerings to Air India's customers and crew. The idea is to tap into Air India's 3 million frequent flyer customer base, which can be leveraged to offer discounted products. The group has also acquired companies like 1mg and Big Basket and made inroads into online fitness, which will add value to the new digital platform. The 2021 acquisition of Big Basket cemented Tata's foray into the online grocery market. In June 2021, Tata Digital had acquired a majority stake in e-pharmacy 1mg, putting it in direct competition with Reliance-owned NetMeds. The same month, Tata Digital signed a $75 million deal with CureFit Healthcare. As part of the deal, CureFit founder and CEO Mukesh Bansal joined Tata Digital in an executive role as president. What's the rationale behind Tata's consumer business play?
The Tata Group has definitely been, looking at consumer-facing businesses with a deeper and wider degree of interest. You will see this fundamentally because if you look at the history of business houses in India, the Tatas and all the old names that we had, they were all about, starting with commodities. And commodities are back-ended businesses. Commodities are manufacturer-oriented businesses. So if you look at India, we had the textile business, the soda ash business, steel, chemicals, all this. Phase 2 was a point of time when these companies took their commodity offerings into brands and sold it in the local market. So the Tata Group did that with Tata Tea, with Tata Chemicals, and numbers of other efforts. And the third stage is when you go completely front-ended with e-commerce, or for that matter, with a super app like the Tata Neu. And in the future, it's going to be about the metaverse and marketing in Web 3.0. The idea is get closer to the consumer, get rid of the middleman, and let's connect with the consumer direct. And that I see across businesses. Oh yes, there's a big synergy and opportunity for cross-selling, but I hope the Tatas don't use it and don't relax with that. Because, when you know that you have a captive market for the product of one company in another, you will tend to get less consumer savvy.
The group, however, is also turning its focus on other segments. Last December, reports emerged that the Tata Group was planning to tap the growing domestic cosmetics market, which is estimated to be worth $20 billion by 2025. In an interview, Trent non-executive chairman Noel Tata had said that beauty products, along with footwear and innerwear, would be a focus area for the group. Trent Limited, which operates West Side retail stores, is a Tata Group company. Noel Tata recently told a financial daily that the Tata Super App could lead to a potential tenfold increase in the number of customers for West Side. Thus, Tata's foray into consumer businesses like Air India, Big Basket, and the beauty market, together with other established brands under Tata Consumer, will directly benefit the group's digital play with Tata Neu. And what will set apart its super app from its earlier digital initiatives?
It really is the super app, and it brings the Tata Group into a combined app appearance. Now, the Tata Group has had many dalliances with apps, some of them bought out from outside, like the Big Basket, app oriented business. And the Tata Group has had some of its own from the old days. So if you really look at it, it's about marrying all of it together and creating a complete front-ended app, which is hopefully going to be dynamic, widespread in its reach, and completely competitive.
The Reliance and Tata Super Apps are geared up for a much anticipated battle royale. While Tata has the advantage of in house products and brands, RIL has the backing of biggies like Google, Microsoft, and Facebook.
सब अच्छी दिख रही हैं यार, कौन सी खरीदूं? ये तो वही बात हुई, 4000 शेयर्स लिस्टेड है, कौन सा लूं? वो तो सबसे आसान है। तुझे 5 पैसा नहीं पता?
अब तो सबको पता है। 5 पैसा पर है 4000 स्टॉक्स की रिसर्च, टेक्निकल टूल्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट आइडियाज। डाउनलोड 5 पैसा नाउ।
अब तो सबको पता है, investing made easy and rewarding with 5 paisa. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
Like super apps, women's cricket too is seeing some action. Plans are afoot for the launch of women's IPL from next year. But the question is, will it be able to draw crowds and sponsors? Our next report has some insights.
India's cricket governing body BCCI, after toying with the idea of starting a women's version of the Indian Premier League for years, has finally decided to implement it. BCCI President Saurav Ganguly and IPL Governing Council Chairman Brijesh Patel have confirmed plans to launch a women's IPL next year, although a final decision is pending. Apart from the need to make the IPL and cricket in general more inclusive, there has been growing chorus of star India players calling for a women's IPL. They believe it will act as a launchpad for young domestic women cricketers who can gain the exposure they need as they play with overseas players. Harmanpreet Kaur, Smriti Mandana, Deepthi Sharma and Jemima Rodriguez have argued for a women's IPL, and so has England captain Heather Knight. The BCCI has been waiting for the right moment when it makes economic sense for them to take up the project. It has been organizing exhibition games of the Women's T20 Challenge since 2018 alongside the men's IPL. After being suspended in 2021, it is returning this year with 4 matches involving 3 teams around the men's playoffs. The 2020 edition of the Women's T20 Challenge recorded 5.34 billion minutes in viewership in India, which is a 140% increase over the previous edition. To test the waters, BCCI is likely to launch Women's IPL with 5 to 6 teams initially. So, is this the right time to start the league?
I personally feel it's the right time. Not only cricket, women's sport in India seems to be doing well, and obviously cricket is one of the top sport. I think our Indian women cricketers are quite up there to showcase their talent, and probably IPL is the best platform. The audience's expectation from IPL is always top class. If we have 6 IPL women's team, it's a minimum of 66 top class women's player available to play the IPL. That's, it's not easy. Now is the right time. We are seeing Australia doing pretty well. England doing pretty well. India is obviously doing quite well. West Indies has just played the semi-finals. South Africa is now doing pretty well. Since the time IPL has started, women's viewership of cricket has gone up. Over the years, we've seen that female contribution to overall television ratings is almost 50-50. Second, also what we've seen over the last couple of years, that a lot of female focused brands have partnered with IPL men's team to kind of talk to their audiences. I don't see any reason for women's IPL not getting that kind of traction in the market. I'm pretty certain that women's IPL will get a lot of traction, and not only from women-centric brands. I think even the brands which generally look at male audiences will also come on. Is the general sense which we are getting so far. Ultimately, I think it's all the on-ground performance of the players which will kind of dictate the audiences.
Indian women's national cricket team is rated 4th in ICC Women's ODI and T20 international rankings. While the team's campaign in ICC Women's ODI World Cup 2022 ended in disappointment, it reached the final in 2017. Shafali Verma, Smriti Mandana and Deepti Sharma are among top-ranked T20 players globally. Last year, 8 Indian players featured in the Women's Big Bash League in Australia, which has completed 7 seasons. Harmanpreet Kaur was named Player of the Tournament. A study by Ormax Media in 2020 found that star players drove the fan base for IPL teams like the CSK, RCB, Kings XI Punjab and Mumbai Indians. There is no doubt that some of the star Indian women cricketers can act as crowd pullers in IPL.
Not all leagues are successful though. Of course, to start off is a very good thing. There's no question about it. But what's important is to see its success. That means, does it get audiences? Very unfortunately, women's cricket does not get that much of audience. So they have to do something. It has to be promoted. BCCI is not socially oriented. It's a commercial organization. It will naturally seek that there should be some commercial benefit to all the parties concerned. Audiences bring advertisers, and advertisers bring in the money. And without that, there is sustainability will be low. They may start it off, but sustainability will be low. Game matters though. So you have to make the game interesting. You have to, even if you have to try a different format, slightly different format, which is faster, a little bit more pacey. But just because there are women viewers in male IPL, it's not necessary that they will translate into the same game in the women's IPL. So once you have a fan base built up, at that time you can expect it to do well. So I think that's a necessary part, and I don't think enough has been done with women cricket players yet in order to build their fan base. To have so many women's oriented products, they want to advertise, they want to be women centric. There are women centric brands that are coming up that will definitely go for the advertising. I don't think they will in fact be the first in the line. There'll be a queue for it.
Finally, the performance of the players and teams will drive viewership. The BCCI can get some of the existing team owners to start women's franchises in order to leverage the existing fan base. Concerted efforts can bring in advertisers, audiences and investors.
क्या हाल?
मत पूछ यार, फिर से स्टॉक्स में फंस गया।
तो स्टॉक्स के साथ बॉन्ड्स, इंश्योरेंस, गोल्ड में बैलेंस कर।
इसमें बहुत तामझाम है।
तुझे 5 पैसा नहीं पता?
अब तो सबको पता है। 5 पैसा है ऑल इन वन अकाउंट। डाउनलोड 5 पैसा नाउ।
अब तो सबको पता है। Investing made easy and rewarding with 5 paisa. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
After women's IPL, let us move on to markets. Against the backdrop of a tumultuous start to the year, India Inc.'s March quarter results will start coming in from next week. The earnings prospects have been shrouded in uncertainty with headwinds from multiple fronts, especially the Russia-Ukraine war. But can the industry deliver a surprise? Let us see what analysts have to say.
India Inc. withstood multiple headwinds from the start of the fourth quarter of FY 2021-22. If supply chain snags and soaring inflation were not enough, the Ukraine-Russia war worsened disruptions during the quarter. The Street too is anticipating severe pressure on margins despite several rounds of price hikes taken across sectors. However, analysts expect Q4 performance to be resilient, aided by the economic recovery. Santosh Meena of Swastika Investmart says the Indian economy is witnessing a strong revival, evident from the all-time high GST collections in March.
As most of the economic indicators on the upswing, we can expect a good Q4 earnings session. The inflation is key talking point. However, the major impact will be seen in the next quarter because the major rise in commodity prices was seen in the month of March. Therefore, the management commentary will be very important.
Meanwhile, according to Motilal Oswal Financial Services, the Nifty has not seen much earnings downgrade so far thanks to upgrades in metals, oil and gas, and negligible impact in IT and BFSI sectors. That said, if the input cost situation does not improve and price increases become inevitable, we are not too far away from some demand dislocation and earnings downgrade even for the Nifty. Analysts too remain optimistic on India Inc. for Q4. HSBC Global, for instance, projects FY22 and FY23 headline Nifty earnings growth at 37% and 19% respectively. It further estimates FY23 Nifty 50 earnings per share growth at 18.9%. However, the brokerage has warned of high commodity costs and says a prolonged period of high commodity prices can prove to be a double whammy to corporate earnings due to decline in margins and lower demand, increasing the risk of earnings downgrades. A closer look reveals automobile and FMCG companies are among the worst hit sectors. Their high input cost worries have been persistent for the past few quarters, and the ongoing disruptions have only added to their woes. Santosh Meena of Swastika Investment expects cement, OMCs and city gas distributors to be the other laggards in Q4.
If we talk about the sectors, then commodity producer will be in the sweet spot. The metal sector may continue its strong outperformance, while the fertilizer and the sugar sector may also come out with strong earnings. Upstream companies like ONGC and Oil India may do very well amid sharp rise in crude oil prices, whereas the heavyweight Reliance may witness strong soar because it is firing on all cylinders. The earnings session will kick off with IT earnings, and there is expectation of strong performance after stellar result by Accenture. The deal pipeline looks good, pricing is improving, and the attrition rate is also stabilizing. The banking sector may continue its good performance amid strong recovery in the economy. If we talk about the real estate sector, then it may surprise the street with its strong performance despite high commodity prices. Infra companies are sitting with huge order books, and Q4 is best in terms of execution.
Against this backdrop, markets will be eyeing Q4 updates by companies on Wednesday ahead of the results season. The Reserve Bank of India will also begin its 3-day monetary policy meeting later today, which would keep equities and bond yields volatile. Globally, investors will track FOMC minutes, progress on the Ukraine-Russia negotiations, and COVID-19 cases in China.
अब क्या किया?
शेयर्स में ट्रेडिंग।
तुम्हें 5 पैसा नहीं पता?
ओए, अब तो सबको पता है। 5 पैसा पर मिलते हैं रिसर्च टूल्स, पोर्टफोलियो एनालिटिक्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट आइडियाज भी। डाउनलोड 5 पैसा नाउ।
अब तो सबको पता है, investing made easy and rewarding with 5 paisa. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
Global markets have been on edge since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war. Meanwhile, after graphic images of deaths in Bucha, near the Ukrainian capital, the UN Human Rights Chief has said that the reports raise disturbing questions of possible war crimes. But what qualifies as a war crime? Watch our next report to find out.
In June of 2020, just days after the International Criminal Court, or ICC, decided to launch a probe into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan, the then US President Donald Trump issued an executive order imposing sanctions on ICC officials involved in probing Americans. The United States is not a state party to the ICC, and its citizens cannot be tried in the International Court. 2 years later, as Russian fighter jets bombed Ukraine, leaving scores of civilians dead, Western countries, led by the United States, want its president, Vladimir Putin, to be tried for war crimes. It is clear that civilians withstand the worst of wars. Keeping that in mind, protection of civilians has been made central to international humanitarian law, which regulates how a war is supposed to be conducted. Presently, the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice are involved in upholding the rules of war. Since civilian casualties have taken place in all recent conflicts, without all of those being labelled as war crimes, you might be wondering exactly what amounts to being a war crime. For example, the bombing of, say, a school or a theatre might cause global outrage, but these actions might still not be called war crimes. This is because a war crime is said to have occurred only when unnecessary injury and suffering is caused by one or more belligerents engaged in a conflict. Let's consider our earlier example. The bombing of the hypothetical school or theatre will be considered a war crime only if the extent of civilian casualties is excessive compared to the military advantage gained. There are three main pillars of humanitarian law. First is the principle of distinction, which requires distinguishing between civilians and combatants. Second is the principle of proportionality, which prohibits military actions that would cause incidental loss of civilian life that would be excessive when compared to the military advantage gained. And third is the principle of precaution, under which the parties to a conflict must avoid or minimize harm to civilians. If any one or all of these principles are not adhered to, it could be said that a war crime has occurred. War crime was defined in the Geneva Conventions as willful killing, torture, or inhuman treatment, including willfully causing suffering or serious injury to body or health, unlawful deportation or transfer or unlawful confinement of a protected person. Civilians, along with infrastructure vital to their survival, cannot be deliberately attacked. The sick and the wounded have to be cared for. This includes injured enemy soldiers who have rights as prisoners of war. The ICC is supposed to investigate and prosecute individual war criminals who are not standing before the courts of individual states. While the ICJ deals with disputes between states, it cannot prosecute individuals. Ukraine has begun a case against Russia at the ICJ. If the ICJ were to rule against Russia, it's the UN Security Council that would be responsible for enforcing that ruling. However, Russia is one of the Council's 5 permanent members and would veto any proposal to sanction it.
इसको 30 डिग्रीज कर देते हैं। अरे नहीं यार 45 डिग्री सही है।
We Indians disagree on everything, but we agree. SBI is the banker to every Indian.
SBI का वीडियो KYC सेविंग्स अकाउंट। Finally I agree.
SBI is the banker to every Indian.
According to some reports, the United States has carried out over 100,000 airstrikes since 2001 in various parts of the world, leaving over 22,000 civilians dead. That's all for today. For more news and analysis, please log into our website www.business-standard.com. And we too will be back tomorrow morning with more. Stay tuned and thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.